Have your parents ever told you not to deal with someone who's married? If they haven't, I'm going to. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I've been counseling men and women who have been perpetrators and victims of abuse, as well as other mental health concerns and conditions over the years. I want to respond to this commenter's comment. I had done a post on dealing with someone who's married, and sort of the ramifications of doing that. And this commenter says, do fathers and mothers forbid their daughters not to deal with married men anymore? Both my parents warned my two sisters and me not to ever be a married man's whore. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if parents, talk to their children about life lessons. I can only speak, about the people that I've worked with, with the women, especially with black women. I've worked with women of all ethnicities and races and things like that. But I will say, for a large portion of the black women and the white women I've worked with, surprisingly, a lot of them were, expected to follow rigid religious teachings. So it's all those teachings about being a good girl, chastity, and all of that kind of stuff. Sex until marriage. You're a whore if you have feelings. You basically need to focus on school and work. So that was a lot of the teachings that I can, I'm just thinking as I'm talking to you all. And so it was more of like, you don't need to date until you're successful. And then once you become successful, then you're supposed to get married, find and marry the love of your life. So a lot of the women that come to me were ruled under, an iron fist. And so, one of the things that I've also noticed too, especially again, and talk about the younger folks who watches me, I think a lot of people are coming to social media now for a lot of their advice, and just to get a clearer understanding of social norms, because unfortunately a lot of people aren't being taught at home. And so I've worked with a lot of people like that as well, who just don't get anything. So they're pretty much neglected or expected to figure life out for themselves. And so they get a lot of this stuff from these coaches that are on social media. And these coaches, unfortunately, from some of the ones I've seen, have, normalized going after someone who's married, because a lot of the teachings are about getting the bag and getting what you need, and just sort of using people and getting that. But I'm not here to judge anybody for what they do. But I think, if you're watching me, if you've been a long time watcher and supporter of me, I definitely think people deserve love. I think they deserve happiness. And with somebody who's married, usually it comes with a whole host of problems, right? And again, I go back to, not necessarily you're being a whore, but more so like, you're building a foundation off of someone else's pain, regardless of what that person tells you. You're that person that you're having the affair with, regardless of what they say, you are building the foundation on someone else's pain. Not only that, sometimes a lot of times, not even just sometimes, but a lot of times when you're engaging with someone who's married, that trauma of that betrayal affects the married partner quite a whole lot. And that can trigger a chain of events where people can become unstable, people can start stalking you, people can start harassing you, people can become violent, people can want to, kill you, for lack of a better word. There's really no workaround around that. People may want to do harm to your children. People may want to do harm to whatever sort of life you and their spouse are living or want to set up for in the future. And they can make it their mission to go on this tangent to just like not let go because they're suffering from it. And I'll give you a good example. Again, I'm going to thank the commenter who brought up the Real Housewives on another post. But yeah, I'll defer to the Real Housewives here. I think it was the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Brandi Glanville is a good example. Brandi, after her husband cheated on her with LeAnn Rimes, and he left her for LeAnn Rimes, Brandi she has never ever been able to let that go. I mean, even now, like years later, I think she's kind of dealing with some health stuff right now, but even some of her last media appearances, she has continued to talk about the pain that affair has caused and what he's done to their children, and his just her career essentially has been built off of the pain that her husband caused. And I don't ever think she ever came back recovered from that. And I don't want to speak on her, because I don't know her personally, but just from what I've seen and just how she talks about it, that's not a woman that is recovered. She's been able to sort of move on and but she always sort of reverts back to the pain that her ex caused her, and sort of uses that opportunity. And so I can't, again, that's her pain, that's her story, and her heart was obviously broken from that. But every time, she gets camera time and she uses that time to talk about her husband and his affair, that has got to do something, when you're on a national platform, that's got to do something to him and his now wife, who now has to carry that sort of that stain, right? Because she's made sure that everybody knows that, right? And so I think that's a good example of just like how that can, that's a heavy burden to carry, versus someone who is single, who is unattached, and can be 100% yours. I just think you deserve that a whole lot more than, climbing an uphill mountain with rocks on your back and all of that comes with it. But to each his own. I can't tell grown people what to do. I don't necessarily subscribe to your horror, but I do. You have to look at, there are some things that I always recommend that, people who do this, what you should look at. And one of those things is, do you have a history of pursuing or being in relationships with people who are unavailable, either physically or emotionally unavailable? What does your self-esteem look like? What do you want out of a loving relationship? And when I'm talking about talking to women, what's your relationship like with your father, and how what did love look like with your mother? Like, how did your mother look loving her person? What did those relationships look like between your parents, or whoever raised you, right? And the same thing with a man. What's your relationship like with your mother, and what sort of examples of love did you see between them? Because sometimes people grow up in homes. A lot of times people grow up in homes where there are affairs, and that becomes normal, seeing their parents have affairs, never being home, fighting all the time, sniffing each other's clothes and things like that. So whether we like it or not, that's what was modeled to them. And so I always do a deep dive with my clients about that, like, where's this coming from? What are you avoiding? If there's anything that like you're avoiding in a relationship, since I think that's also a common theme as well. So hopefully this helps. Like, follow, and share if this has been helpful for you, or if you know someone who may need it. Thanks so much for this comment.